This is the Next Bite of Life podcast, the place to be to hear personal stories from expats, digital nomads, and everybody else taking their next bite of life. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Next Bite of Life podcast. My name is Kem Kem. Today, my guest is Vivinne Williams. How are you doing today, Vivinne?
Oh, I'm doing great. Very happy to be here.
I'm so glad that you were able to come on here. Now, when I even say your name, it makes me feel a little bit relaxed. So I think that you were destined for what you're in. So I'm going to talk to you today about your life and your career and how you reinvented yourself. Now, for everybody to know and get a sense of where you are and who you are, where are you living right now?
I'm living in upstate New York in the United States.
Okay. Have you
Yeah.
always lived there or did you live somewhere else?
Oh, well, yes. So I was born in Jamaica, and with my mom, immigrated to the United States, we had the American dream coming from, a small island country. We were really told
Yeah.
that people believed the streets were almost paved with gold in the US.
Of
Yeah.
course. Tell us what you do. I want to find out about chakra and everything. So please just take your time and explain to me what you do and how you help people.
What began, I guess, is it okay for me to go back to the transition?
I want you to go back all the way back, as far back as you want.
Well, so what happened for me was, and this might resonate with some of your listeners, during the Great Recession in the US, which of course affected the entire world. So we're talking 2008,
Oh, yeah.
2009. And yeah, I was an art professor. So I was actually in a job for life because I actually was given tenure. I earned
Oh,
tenure, I
cool.
should say.
Okay.
And some people may not know that. It basically means you have a job for your entire life
Mhm.
in the institution. So I was teaching art, chem, but I was really unhappy.
Yeah.
And this ties into the work I do now. I was in a hostile work environment. I was being bullied
Wow.
by four males, and this is part of what's called in academia like the old guard,
Yes.
literally. It's a bastion of, first of all, there just aren't many women in academia relatively. It's almost like something like medicine was in the 50s. There
Yeah.
is just men. And I am a Black woman, and there are very few Black women. And I was just treated, I think it was more gender based, really.
Yes.
Because I saw them treat other women of other backgrounds in the exact same horrible way.
Yeah.
They would say horrible things behind their back. It was just very ugly.
Yeah.
So I left academia, but in doing that, at the height of the recession, I was depressed, I was anxious, and I was literally diagnosed with PTSD.
Wow.
Yeah, I was shocked when the therapist said that. And here in America, I know you have worldwide listeners, but here in America, therapy is like just a very normal thing.
Yes.
It's almost a thing that you sort of, not prestigious, but it's like, oh, I have to talk to my therapist.
Yeah. I lived in Hollywood and I heard that all the time.
Exactly. It's just a normal thing to have a therapist. It's just your counselor. Well, so my dear, she said, well, you do not have to have been in a war, but you have all the signs of PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder from the
Mhm.
bullying. So I had no
Wow.
self confidence, chem. I was out of a job now, and the recession was happening. So
Mm.
it was a very difficult few years, very difficult. I almost went homeless, but
Wow.
because of my own creativity, which
Yeah.
I am a creative person. It's actually I'll tell it separately if you're interested and if we have time. But I basically was never out on the street, but I
Okay.
barely was working. I ended up on public assistance. This after being a professor, it's a big drop.
Exactly.
So, long story short, now what I do is I work with women. So I basically was underemployed for some years and everything, but I ended up being able to reinvent myself, and that's a big part of what I want to help women with is reinventing myself, how they can reinvent themselves, how they can start fresh.
Did it ever feel like you could go back since you had a job that had tenure? Did you feel like since everything was so hard that it was okay going back and like putting up with the bullying, or had you just had it?
That's a great question. I don't know. I probably could have because it was a state-run school, but I mean, I had put in my resignation. I had left, and it was so toxic. I wouldn't recommend to anyone. In fact, that's part of what I teach is if a job is making you physically
Yeah,
ill, which mine was, I recommend leaving it. I do. In fact, Kemkem, I'm really glad you asked me this, and I know this isn't about travel, but it really might help a woman or a man out there. um, if I had left the job sooner, which I wanted to, I would have been in a better position, meaning
yeah.
emotionally. But because I waited so long, I literally was beaten down
Wow.
to the point that that's why I had such difficulties. Does that make
Yes.
sense? Like I wanted to leave a year earlier, but like you're hinting at, my friends in academia were like, "No, no, no, don't quit the job." And I knew it wasn't good for me, but I stayed another year and of course it got
Yeah.
worse. So if anything, I would say, and this is what I teach women, anything in life, I think our intuition is key. It's really key to listen to your inner voice. And my inner voice knew that was not the right place for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so I hung on out of security, and I don't think that that's a good idea.
Yes.
I really don't. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Now I think about,
Yeah.
I read something about you online, like in your bio, where you said your mom had caught you like in a yoga pose. So obviously it's something that was with you even when you were younger, right?
Okay. Yes. Yes. I was growing up in the Bronx in a sort of a rough part of town. And, but I started yoga with Lilia's Yoga for Health, which was a show. I want to say she ran through the 70s. She introduced a lot of Americans to
Hmm.
yoga. And, this was, yeah, like, so I was quite young. I was 14. And I just saw in the TV guide
Yeah.
yoga, and I didn't know what the word meant. And being a very inquisitive child, I was like, well, I'm going to check the
Yeah.
program because all I knew it's for
Yeah.
health. So I said, oh, for health. I'm interested in health. So you're right. I did have that. And I think I was sitting in a full lotus meditating at 14. And my mom, who is, I mean, she's a wonderful woman. She took the adventure to come to
Yes.
America, but she hadn't finished high school, so she just was like, "What are you doing?" And I opened one eye and I looked at her, I said, "I'm meditating," like only a teenager
Of
can,
course.
and I closed my eye back and I sat up straighter and she just walked away in a
Yeah.
huff, like, I don't know what is wrong with my
Yeah.
daughter.
I think I brought it to the US way too soon, right? That's what my mother would think. Oh, she's cursed. That's the first thing she always thought.
Yeah, it was almost like that level. I mean, she didn't go quite to that point, but she just was like, there's something. I just don't know what she's watching on TV. She have to stop her.
That's great.
So,
So now, after you
yeah.
had the tough times, like when the recession happened, as happened with a lot of
Mhm.
people, there was a lot of stress, a lot of,
Yeah.
so you decided to pivot. And what led you? Was it the counselor? What led you to meditation?
Well, as you said, well, these honestly, it was yoga at the time that helped me the most. I mean, to be honest, Kem, during that time after I left my job, I literally don't remember much of each day, but I know I would literally take a yoga
Hmm.
mat once I found a living
Hmm.
situation, and I would just roll out my yoga mat and I would do movement, and that is what really got me through the worst part of the depression, and dealing during the recession. So, and meditation came a little bit later in my own healing,
Okay.
but I had so my trajectory is strange because I had prior to academia been a certified yoga teacher,
Ah,
and I had already so I was already there was always a conflict in my life between actually two things, between a visual art, between being an artist, and the health and wellness
yeah.
were the things I've always been just bopping between. And so I was teaching art as a
Hmm.
professor, and so I was more into that, but I also still had that love of spirituality, well-being, meditation, and all of that. So it just made sense.
And it's so true because anyone who looks at your
Mhm.
YouTube channel, which please, tell us, I'll have you tell us all about the channel and what they can expect. Anyone who tunes into your channel can just tell that just from looking at you. And you really, it's not just, I'm not just
Mhm.
saying it about the name. When they see you, there is a sense of calmness that
Oh,
comes with
thank
it.
you.
So I think it's like, yeah, no, it's true. It's like you can tell that it's somebody who's really spiritual and you want to learn from somebody like that instead of like somebody who just discovered yoga like yesterday and feels they must teach it to the
Yes,
world,
and Kem, that is so common nowadays, especially you see it a lot on Instagram where somebody, they're just starting out and
Yes,
they're trying to teach on such a big scale when they really haven't even put much into it themselves. In fact, I have a really quick story. A young
exactly.
woman wrote me on YouTube and
Yeah.
she says, "Thank you so much. I love your videos. In fact, I'm using your videos to make a a chakra course." And I thought, I know. I
Oh
mean,
no way.
and she
I
told
should
me. So I wrote her back very nicely, but I didn't wanna just upset her, and I wrote her back and said, "I think that's
yeah,
lovely," but I said, "Have what you really need to incorporate and practice, have you practiced any of what I've been teaching before you go and start teaching other people? You can't just."
teaching
And I
others.
she never
Exactly.
responded. So I God help the
Of
people who
course.
it's like anything. I mean, you don't just, any analogy you could come up with. I can't think of, like, you do something for some time before you then turn around. You don't just
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I don't
exactly.
start teaching baking when I'm learning. I mean, I learn how to bake these awesome cookies, and they're low fat or they're,
Yeah,
paleo, and I do that for
yeah.
some time. I don't just suddenly, "Well, I got a recipe, so now I'm gonna teach other people."
I that was always one of my pet peeves with like
Really?
travel bloggers, And I wrote a blog post that it was such a
Oh.
controversial one because I kept saying, "How can you visit like Rome for 3 days and then you come back and tell me the very best places to eat there, the very best things to do?" It's like, how the heck can you tell me that after being there for 3 days? I go, my mother-in-law's been there for 70 years and she can't even tell you the best places to
Wow.
eat.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
see what you're saying about people thinking that they
An
become
expert.
just by being in the atmosphere, they become experts, and it doesn't work
Yes,
like
and,
that.
thank you for that analogy because I totally so in terms of talking about travel, my favorite place in the world is Italy. I just adore Italy, and I'm with you because I
Oh,
think I read
nice.
that most people visit Venice for a day, 1 day, and I
Yes.
that's absurd. It
Yep.
is so beautiful and there's so much to
Yeah.
see. That's it's just it's just absurd is the only thing I'd say. It deserves
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. I know. It's like the boat comes in at 9 and leaves at 6, and yet you're an expert.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
It's like it doesn't work that way. You have to have been practicing yoga like Vivienne for like
Yeah, something like
19
that.
years, and then you can say, okay, I'm getting a course, which leads me to the point you do have a course coming out, or it's just coming out on.
I do. It's actually as we're recording this, it's still in registration, and it will be a continuing course, so they can definitely check it out. The current it's a chakra course. The current aim and title, you can tell by the title, is Chakras for Challenging Times. And so it's for strengthening, it is for women, and I call the ladies in my
Mhm.
course goddesses. It's for strengthening. We'll focus on meditation, mindset, and manifestation. So healing our emotional wounds, which are related to the chakras. The chakras are those energy centers in our body. They govern different areas
Oh,
of our life, of our being. So there's a heart
thank you
chakra.
for saying
Yeah,
that.
there's a heart chakra. So it
Okay.
has to do with emotions related to love. How can we love? Are we open to love? Are we closed off? Um, there's a root chakra, which very much has to do with prosperity and with having a stable home, with having stable
Mhm.
material, your needs met. And so, yeah, I'm going to take us through this journey through the chakras and teach different practices. So, yes, if it will be something that will be running in the future. So whenever, someone is listening to this podcast, yeah.
I mean, the good thing about it is, like, as usual, I'm going to have the show notes on the Next Bite of Life
Okay.
website. So it'll have all your information, as the website, the course, the YouTube channel, which is quite a strong one. You've
Yeah.
got over
Oh,
13,000 subscribers. Now, that is quite a feat
yes.
because it's a really hard medium to like make yourself known, but you've managed to do it. So congrats on that
Yeah.
one.
And if anyone listening to you is wanting to sort of maybe be like you, they're an expat or they have a topic of expertise and they want to, take themselves on YouTube, I do a little bit of a side hustle with teaching people how to. It is tricky. It's almost like a roulette wheel. Like
Hmm.
you can, the odds are very high right now because Kem, I don't know if you know this where you are, but certainly in the US, every kid, if you ask them, what do you want to do? They go, oh, I want to be a YouTuber,
Oh, yes.
which to them means they just want to do what they want
Yeah.
and then they think they'll just make money. And it's
Yes.
not so simple. So I do also train one-on-one on how to grow a YouTube channel. So my the channel is called Yoga Bliss Dance, um, separate words, yoga, bliss,
Uh,
dance. And my website is intheflowofmagic.com because I do believe that we can go with the flow of life.
mhm.
So it's like a spiritual person that even will still have upsets, will still have, bad things happen,
Of course.
but that we can still follow that flow that's basically trying to keep us safe and keep us on the right path for us. So
Yes.
that's why that name, In the Flow of Magic.
I
Yeah,
think it's
.com.
lovely. Now, let me ask you
Yeah.
something. This is the time, especially with everything that's going on in the world, whether it's the racial tension
Mhm.
or the elections coming up, it
Mhm.
just seems like we cannot get along. We can't agree on
And the
anything.
pandemic.
Yes, and the
Don't forget a
pandemic.
pandemic.
Oh, exactly. That's the biggie. That's that's the mother load, right? So it's like with
Right.
everything, everybody's stressed out. Everybody's looking for a way out. And this is
Mhm.
a great alternative to, like, the medications, because most people will go to the doctor or the shrink or whatever, and they'll just throw the Adderall and all the other drugs at you instead of like
Right.
trying to figure it out in a way that will help you and help your psyche. So being in your line, this is a helpful way to actually make people feel better. Is that not true? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would strongly recommend meditation, and I would recommend actually more mindfulness meditation. That I feel like the chakra meditation is it's a little bit higher level,
Okay.
but the mindfulness meditation is the one that has been studied in the West. And they're all I mean, now the science is catching up. But I started, yeah, I don't know how many, like maybe 2 decades ago in college studying meditation.
Okay.
Um, Maybe I can share that just in a minute or so. But when I was in college, I was the first one in my family to go to college. As I said,
Oh,
we were immigrants, we
yeah.
were poor immigrants. And so I got into kind of a fancy college. And of course, being a fancy college, they had, get this, a like a Zen garden
You
and a
like it?
tea house. Yeah. They had a Japanese tea house. I'm like,
Oh,
okay, I don't know what a
nice.
Japanese tea house is. I'm from the Bronx.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they would have Zen monks,
Wow.
actual monks come in and lead meditation. And again, being curious, I said, I gotta check this out.
Yeah. That was a fancy
You know,
school.
it was a fancy school, and that's where I began meditation, was in college, with guidance where I
Yes.
began it. And the first experience after the first time I meditated with the monks, so you go in through this garden and it's beautiful. After I finished, I do not lie to you, the green looked greener. It was almost psychedelic. I literally was like, whoa, what happened? Everything
Wow.
looked fresher, clearer, sharper. And that is literally one of the things that if you're meditating properly, it's like your senses become sharper. And I never forgot that. And I said, no, this is something I want to know more
Uh-huh.
about.
Yeah.
Especially being an artist, I'm like, whoa, I'm
And
seeing things
share about.
more clearly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
fantastic.
but I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to be an expat. Yes.
Yeah. What would you head to Italy, or do you have any other countries in mind just as backup?
If anyone listening needs somebody to come teach a yoga or meditation retreat in Italy, I would love to live in Italy for part of the year. That is part of my
Yeah.
dream. Maybe in
Yeah. Oh,
Umbria.
nice.
I've heard Umbria is quite as lovely as Tuscany.
It's gorgeous. We were there a couple of years ago and it was absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
The food, everything. So yeah, that is, so if you're listening, maybe you can maybe along with the meditation, you can have it come into view as you do the chakras and see if like God will answer your
Oh,
prayers and send you
absolutely. I
there.
do believe that's part of we can manifest. I believe we are co-creators. And actually I think that's a wonderful note to end on. We as human beings are another teacher of mine says we are God's highest form of creation. Certainly as far as we know. And
Yes, yes, yes,
we
yes.
are co-creating. I do believe that. I mean, you co-created a life where you are.
Yes.
We do not control everything. I don't believe that, but we can work to create more of what we desire and again, stay in that flow and then it does happen. You desired to travel the world, right? You took steps, you envisioned.
Yes.
That's how it works. That's
Yes.
manifestation.
That's great, Vivian. Thank you for talking to me this afternoon. It's been
Oh,
fun.
thank you so
And
much.
everybody listening to this, make sure you check out her YouTube channel and come on the website to find out the other information about Vivian. So, once again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.